Hi there. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast with Lisa Schlossberg. I'm your host, Lisa Schlossberg, a licensed social worker, certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. If you, like I have, struggle with your relationship with food, eating, and body image, I am here with this podcast to guide you into healing the relationship you have with yourself through a trauma-informed, holistic, and mind-body-soul approach. Together, we can support you in building a lifestyle of more peace, freedom, safety, and power. Hello, and welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. This is me, Lisa Schlossberg, and we are back. We are back with another episode of the solo series, and I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. So before we dive into all the things, let's cover some housekeeping items. Number one, if you are seeing this in video, you can see that if you've been catching up and you're keeping up, this is a different location. I'm in a different setting. The reason for that is because this week I'm cat sitting for a family friend and the show must go on. Microphone, no microphone, wherever I am now I know, and I'm practicing. If I have my laptop, we're doing this thing. So that's where I am. I have my beanie on again because that really helps me show up here. And I will just say, I am simultaneously maybe the most excited to be here that I've been, and also the most resistant to being here that I've been. It's a very interesting combination that I find myself sitting in right now, but either way, I'm showing up, and there is so much to cover. There's so much to cover. So I want to dive in. Let's just do it. Reminder, join me on Patreon. So as usual, what I want to do is dive into some follow-up thoughts about the last episode and maybe the one before that, before we kind of keep moving. Now, the first thing that I want to just come back to, a client call that I had this last week brought this to my attention a bit. And then I thought, you know what, if it's coming up here, I also think that it's probably coming up on the podcast. But that's the thing about a podcast. I don't really know what kind of thoughts and questions that you have when you're listening to this. So I'm just going to bring it here in case it's helpful. And that is, as I have talked about the 3 levels, there's the crawling and the walking and the running, level 1, 2, 3 of intentional weight loss. It can suggest, that kind of framework can suggest that it's linear, that you go from here to here to here. And that once you move through one level, you get to the other, and then, and you keep working your way through it. And as I think I've said already before, it's not necessarily that black and white. It's not that cut and dry. It's not that linear. And so I just want to speak to that for a moment because I acknowledge that on one hand, what I'm saying is you have to move through these 3 levels similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then on the other hand, the other thing that I want to say, maybe you've heard me say that if you're an emotional eater, it's not realistic to think that you are going to go the rest of your life without that being true. The same way that someone who maybe stops drinking alcohol might have those urges or tendencies or cravings later on in life, And so again, on one hand, what I'm saying in level 1 is we have to practice emotional abstinence. But then also sometimes what I'm saying is there really is no such thing because you're likely going to be an emotional eater for the rest of your life. So how do we reconcile that? And what do we do with that? Because it's really not, I understand why it can feel kind of conflicting. And at the same time, this is where for me, it's not conflicting. It's just nuanced. It's just not black and white. It really is gray. So when I'm supporting people one-on-one with the goal of intentional weight loss. And so things like this are coming up. And what I wanted to tell you is about someone that I had a conversation with who recently said, when I think about intentional weight loss, I get concerned about the fact that every once in a while, I still do use food as a coping mechanism. When my stress levels get so high, there are times where I really do feel quite disempowered. I just turn to food and it's totally compulsive. And, And I'm not completely out of the woods with that, let's say. And so there was a concern about, am I in quote unquote level 3 where I can be thinking about intentional weight loss if I'm still not completely abstinent around using food as my primary coping mechanism. And this is where, again, I want to break it down a little bit, because this is someone who in the past has a history of an eating disorder and has had multiple years of really disordered eating patterns and habits. Then we worked together for a while. She moved through the group program and things like that. And now she has, I remember a session where months ago we reconnected, maybe it was a year ago or something like that, but we reconnected and I asked her, we were dealing with anxiety stuff and some depressive stuff and like just mental health stuff. And when I asked her, how has food and eating been? I remember her saying to me like, oh my God, I forgot that that's like why I even know you. I forgot that that's how we even got connected, because food and eating hasn't been an issue at all. Like I don't struggle with that. And now, okay, so I'm laying all this out where it's kind of like she was in level 1 with disordered eating for a while. And then we moved through practice level 1 and 2, re-establishing a mind-body connection, really listening to herself and integrating the spirituality component, which was very new at the time. Like all this, it's all happening. And now, here's the difference. What she's saying to me now is, when my stress gets so high, like when I am at a 10 out of 10, sometimes I still turn to food. And why I'm telling you this is because that is a very different experience than where she has been in the past. And so I want it to be clear that if you're in a relationship with food where every once in a while, when your stress is at its all-time high and the alarm bells are ringing and you are completely dysregulated in your nervous system, when you are overwhelmed with emotional energy, it is okay that every once in a while you find yourself turning to food. That's the part that isn't necessarily going to go anywhere. And what I'm saying to you is it doesn't have to. Like I say in module 1 of the program, and like I've said many times here on this podcast, the problem is not eating emotionally. The problem is eating emotionally in response to everything all of the time. Okay, so the difference now is food and eating is not her only coping mechanism, and it's also not her primary coping mechanism. Now it has shifted where, for me, I'll even use myself as an example, where if I'm going through a really, really hard time, like similarly, and by the way, it doesn't have to be just a hard time. And I want to keep bringing back this idea. It's not about good or bad. Like when we tend to think or judge in our human brain that we have the good emotions and the bad emotions. That's not the way the system works. It's a system of energy. It doesn't know if it's good or bad. So what I'm saying is, if you are overwhelmed with positive emotions or negative emotions, it doesn't matter. When your system is overwhelmed, when my system is overwhelmed, I might still find myself turning to food, because that is mechanism number 1 that I go back to when sometimes the stress or emotion is so overwhelming, I can't find the other tools in my toolbox. Okay. So every once in a while, it's going to happen, but that doesn't mean that you haven't, mostly progressed past level 1 into level 2. And I will say that even just thinking about myself and my own recent experience, as you've heard me say, I am the leanest and thinnest and strongest and fastest I've ever been in my life. But there are still moments where I will turn to food as a coping mechanism. And I just know I'm not afraid of that. I'm not judging that. I'm not worried about that. It's just part of it. And I'm going to say way more about this moving forward. But if I don't get scared of it, if I'm just in a relationship with it where it's like, yeah, okay, I got really stressed out. I turned to food, I ate, and I did. Now we're combining what's going on internally with what's going on externally. I can acknowledge that sometimes my emotional eating puts me in a caloric surplus and that goes against the caloric deficit that's needed for fat loss. I'm aware of that. But if it's every once in a while, it's not going to derail the process of intentional weight loss. It actually has to be integrated into the process because, again, it's not the primary or only way of coping. It's one of many, many things in the toolbox, so much so that it comes up so infrequently that it can be on the ride for intentional weight loss as we go. So again, it's just, I'm saying this because this is where I don't want for you hearing this to be like, well, I still, every once in a while it happens, so I can't think about no, we have to make it's more nuanced than that. It's just more complicated than that. And how badly I wish I could say it's level 1, it's level 2, it's level 3. It's just so linear. You go from boom, boom, boom. But that's not the way it works. So that's follow-up thought number 1. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now, other follow-up thought. I want to come back to this idea of ego syntonic versus ego dystonic. And so like I shared, ego dystonic is where it really doesn't feel aligned with you. It doesn't feel true for you in terms of how you understand yourself. An ego dystonic would be what I would consider like diet culture conditioning, because we've taken it in. But I don't feel like any of us, we weren't born, we didn't come out of the womb feeling so inadequate about what we look like with all these messages. To me, that's how I like get a sense of what's ego dystonic. Is like, that doesn't, that's not mine. So I want to just come back to this idea because I had this memory kind of flash through my head just to give you an idea. And I remember when I was lifeguarding. So when I was in college, I was also a lifeguard. That's how I made money in college and over the summers. And I couldn't have been reading a book because that would not be allowed. I think I was listening to a book while I was lifeguarding. And this book I believe it was called Life with Ed, which is Life with Eating Disorder. Okay. And I haven't looked it up since, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was called. And I remember as I was listening to it, what I remember, and I'm saying I haven't looked it up because it's like, this is just my memory of how it went. I was listening to it and it was basically talking about very early on in the book. It was basically saying like, you wake up and you're immediately stressed out about what you look like. And then you look in the mirror and you hate what you see and you just keep picking yourself apart and all you see is imperfection and everything on your mind is about how you're not good enough and like all this stuff. And I remember this book had been referred to me by someone. And as I was listening to it, I remember just thinking like, this is not at all my experience. Like it's talking to me as though this is what it's like. This isn't what it's like at all. And I could understand that for some people it is, sure. But for context, I was coming from just dividing my body in half. I had just lost about 150 pounds. So it really didn't resonate at all when the story was you look in the mirror and you hate what you see. Because at that point, I remember being like, I don't hate what I see at all. I'm actually really psyched about what I see. I was still struggling with it. I was still listening to this book because I wanted to heal and recover from an eating disorder. Yes, 100%. But now I have the language that it was so ego dystonic, like that story of, so you hate yourself, so you feel bad about yourself. And I was like, no, and no. So you hate what you look like? No, still no. And so I'm saying this because I want to invite you, as you're listening to all of this, but like this podcast or anything else, to be willing to do that, to like hear something and be like, that's not No, so identifying what is ego dystonic, and also maybe I'll just push it a little bit, not just identifying what feels ego dystonic, but to start bringing the awareness to the messages that you have taken in. I mean, this is like this, I'm not saying anything new at this point, but paying attention to the messages you've taken in and just starting to like practice that. That is, wait, no, this is not mine. I don't need to listen to this. I don't need to believe in this, because it was a very powerful thing that I did. And I remember, like, looking back, I was so glad I did that, because I kept trying to, here's the thing, I kept trying to force it. I kept trying to force it. It was like, people said that this book would be helpful. People said I should read this book. So I should let this be true for me. I should take this story and make it my own. But the thing that I did was say, yeah, no, this doesn't resonate and this doesn't land with where I am in my journey right now. And so what did I do? I stopped listening to it. I stopped reading it. And I remember thinking, like, it's too bad I got this book, because this is not at all what I need right now. So you are where you are, but it's always an invitation to check in with yourself, really. Is this ego syntonic? Is this ego dystonic? So anyway, that's that follow-up thought. Okay, moving on. The next thing I want to tell you is, I'm not going to fall into this whole rabbit hole, but the one text that I got from Bob, we're back with text from Bob, that I love and adore this so much, because it's like, it's kind of similar sometimes to an experience I have with ChatGPT, where I'm like trying to articulate something and trying to put something together, and then it just like spits it back to me, and I'm like, that is, thank you for that sentence, or that word, or whatever it is. So Bob sent me a text that I absolutely love. Here's what he said: take it seriously, hold it gently, was something I had good examples for. Holding a puppy or a baby. Take it seriously, but hold it gently. And so that's, I've been saying that. Take it seriously, hold it gently. And then he comes along and says, I have the great example for this: holding a baby. And to me, it's like, what better way to start the conversation? I know I keep saying we're starting the conversation, and 20 something episodes in, we're not starting, but in some ways we are, because to me, it's like we're leading up to making it granular. What we're leading up to the ins and outs, the action that intentional weight loss requires. And we're really getting into all of that. But to just kind of pause and say, it's like holding a baby. We've covered the fact that maybe you don't feel ready to be a parent. And this idea of reparenting yourself and being your own mother, father, whatever it is a lot to digest and take in. But this idea, and I want you to hold on to this as we move forward through this whole conversation, that is, take it seriously the way you would when you're holding a baby. You have to take that seriously, and also hold it gently. The same way you would with a puppy or a baby, hold it gently. So anytime you need to remember the energy of this, it's like holding a baby. And that's why, to me, it is just so perfect, because I'm over here telling you, this is the beginning of you being a parent. This is the beginning of you being a parent. And so what better way to initiate the process of you parenting yourself than to think about holding yourself like a baby? Take it seriously, hold it gently. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. We will come back with more text from Bob in the next episode. Okay, now I also want to tell you about, so I was on an airplane. This is just a quick kind of anecdote that will guide us into the rest of this episode. I was on an airplane recently, and I realized that, so I go to the bathroom, and bathrooms on airplanes are quite small. And so I sit down on the little toilet, and I realize that I look over into the mirror, and immediately, no conscious thought, I'm looking at like my everything. I mean, everything. Cause I'm like sitting this close, like an inch from the mirror, right? And I'm looking at like my eyelashes and my makeup and my eyebrows and like every individual little hair on my face. And then I'm like starting to fix my hair and fix my this and fix my that and just all. And I notice that I'm doing this. And then like immediately I become aware and I realize that I'm doing that thing where I look in the mirror, I catch my reflection, and I'm not going to say that I was like immediately objectifying myself. But in some ways that's exactly what was happening because I forgot. This is a moment of forgetting. And I'm looking at myself as something to look a certain way. I'm focusing on how I look. I look in the mirror and I get distracted by my physical appearance and I forget. I forget to pay attention to how I'm feeling, what's going on inside, because all of a sudden I look in the mirror and I'm seeing reflected to me my physical experience. And then I get distracted by that and I forget about the rest of me. I forget about the spiritual being. I forget about my animal brain. I forget about the social context. I forget about everything going on internally because I look in the mirror and I just start picking apart all the little things. And again, not with like criticism or judgment. And I think that's the important thing here is I'm not someone who today anyway, I'm not looking in the mirror and again, like hating what I see or being really negative about what I see. It doesn't carry that kind of charge, but my point is that it doesn't really matter because if I'm looking in the mirror and I'm just getting distracted by me as a physical being, now all of a sudden there's things for me to do. It's like little fixing that needs to happen or that I believe because I'm not consciously thinking about it needs to happen. And then, so here's why I'm saying this, because if I were not practicing waking up and coming out of the cave, I might go to the bathroom, look in the mirror, I don't even know if I want to use the word distracted, but get kind of like sucked into seeing myself as a physical being. And then I could stay there. I could stay there the whole time. I could look in the mirror. I could fix my face, fix my hair, fix my makeup, and then walk out the bathroom. Okay. And if I'm doing that every single time I see my reflection, I'm forgetting and then I'm not remembering. I'm forgetting that I'm a spiritual being. I'm looking at myself just like building off the last episode. It's like focusing so much on the outside of the house and completely forgetting about the inside of the house. And it's innocent. It's not a bad thing that happens. It's just about paying attention and becoming mindful of that because it will happen if you're not paying attention. If you let your brain do what it's going to do, you're going to have your animal brain in a social context, and then you're going to see yourself in the mirror and be caught up in the physical. And then if you spend your whole life there, just in that kind of relationship with your body, then when are you ever going to remember that you're more than that? And like we talked about in the last couple of episodes, you remembering that you are more than that is the necessary foundation for you feeling safe enough with yourself so that intentional weight loss can be something that's sustainable. So we have to have moments of remembering. And that really is why I'm telling you this story, because I'm no different. I'm no different. Like I go to the bathroom, I look in the mirror and I see my body and I start immediately fixing it. Like that's just what happens. But the only thing that I then do and practice is waking up to that. And so I want to tell you another kind of tool or practice. Here's your homework assignment for this week. If this is the stuff that you're doing, find your eyes. Find your eyes. This is exactly what I did, and this is exactly what I do when I notice that I'm forgetting again. I'm in a moment of forgetting. I'm objectifying myself and I'm fixing my body. How do I remember again? I find my eyes. And I look in the mirror and I look in my eyes, because the eyes are the window to the soul. So if you want to connect with yourself and remember that you are a soul and a spirit, forget about all that stuff that you're looking at and you're focusing on and all the things you want to be different and all the things that you want to perfect. Find your eyeballs. Look into your eyeballs and open up yourself to a moment of genuine connection with you, the human. Now I have to take these. It's like, that's what you want to do, is find your eyes and pay attention to yourself. I literally will like take a deep breath and remember, I am human. I am the soul. I am the spirit living in the body. And if I find my eyes and I'm looking at myself and I'm gazing into my own eyeballs, you might notice when you practice this, by the way, that it can be really uncomfortable. Like eye gazing with yourself. If you don't have a safe relationship with you, and you are someone who takes every opportunity to be distracted from yourself, to avoid yourself, to not spend time with yourself, eye gazing with yourself in the mirror, honestly, is like the first thing that I would have you do, or one of the first things. And if that even feels really threatening and uncomfortable, you can even just sit with the idea of it, like how it might feel. Like we've talked about before, like if you visualize yourself looking at your own eyes, just see what kind of comes up, or what emotional reaction you might feel to that, because that's the whole idea. Is it can feel very vulnerable, very, even though it's quote unquote just you and yourself. If you barely know yourself, the way that we've been talking about, like parent and child, if you've been an absent parent or an abusive parent or a neglectful parent, looking yourself dead in the eye can bring up a lot. And that's okay, because that's okay. That's just what's going to happen. But I want to really encourage you to do that and to practice that, because that's going to be how you essentially claw your way out of all of this ego dystonic internalized conditioning thinking that you have. Is you need to come back to you. You need to come back to yourself. And a really good way to do that, if you forget that you're a spiritual being when you see your physical in the mirror, is look at your eyes. And so that's exactly what I did. So that's why I'm telling you this is, again, I am no different. It's going to keep happening. It's never going to stop happening. You are conditioned to see yourself as a physical being. It is your job and your responsibility to remember that you are a spiritual being. And that is one way to practice it. So that's an optional homework assignment for you. Now, the other thing that it's so funny and cool how, like, as I am going through all this and I have my little notes in my notepad and then I see things and I'm like, oh, that's a great, yes. Like, I'm just like collecting stuff at this point. Feels like my antenna are up for anything that I can incorporate here. So one of those things was, I actually don't know where this came from, but when I saw this quote show up, I was like, oh my God, that is just it. The quote is, this is a Bruce Lee quote, quick. It says, "The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus." So good. The successful warrior. We're going to talk about being a successful warrior. The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. Okay, now wherever I grabbed this quote from, it says, it emphasizes that extraordinary achievement stems from intense discipline, concentration, and dedication rather than innate superhuman talent. Okay, the reason I'm bringing this here is because A, I agree, but B, because to me, this really captures the idea that is, you have so much power, as you've heard me say, in your conscious input. What are you telling yourself? And beyond that, what are you focusing on? What are you choosing to focus on? Because you're going to have thought number 1 and thought number 2 and 3, 4, 5, and 6. And which one do you want to focus on? Where are you putting your attention? Where are you choosing to put your energy and attention? And so if you are, again, just kind of mindlessly autopilot, looking in the mirror, fixing yourself, thinking you're not good enough and nothing's ever going to be right, and if that's where you're putting your energy and attention, whether you're conscious of it or not, then you're going to stay there. But if you can focus, if you can practice disciplining your mind, your conscious input, your beliefs, what you're telling yourself, your inner dialogue, if you can practice that focus internally, just like we've been talking about externally, if you can focus on the dumbbell that you're lifting, if you can focus on your breath while you're running, if you can focus, right? Because if you are, again, distracted by other people, what other people are doing, how heavy their weight is, how heavy their body is, whatever kind of distraction, we've talked for weeks now about this idea of focusing, dialing in, locking in your attention and your input. And that's everything. So again, whether it's focusing and practicing discipline about what's going on inside what you're telling yourself, or focusing and practicing discipline about what you're doing and the way you're behaving and connecting your mind to body in that sense, whatever it is, successful warriors are the average men with laser-like focus. Focus. You can do that. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to come back to and build on is the idea that your body is your home. And when I say that, and as I was listening to the last few when we're talking about it in more detail, what I want to bring into this conversation is really intention and purpose. And we're going to talk more about this, but what is the purpose of anything? Or what is the intention behind anything is going to inform our experience of it and with it. So, for example, if someone said, hey, this is your home, this is the house that you live in, and the purpose of it is for it to look a certain way. Well, then the focus goes to how does it look? How does it look? How does it look? Because that's the purpose. That's the intention of the thing. If we are told that the purpose and the intention of your home is to appear a certain way, then we're going to be in relationship with it like that. That's the priority. That's the purpose. That's the intention. We have to make sure it looks a certain way. And if we're focused on what it looks like, then maybe we're not paying that much attention to the fact that we live in it. Because what we were taught or told or what we believe is that that's not the purpose. The purpose is not living in it. The purpose is looking at it. So that, again, informs the experience we have. Okay, now, building on that, bringing it back to, we do the same thing with our bodies. Our body is our home. Okay, so a lot of us, again, have taken it in and internalized the message and the belief that the purpose of our body is to look a certain way, to weigh a certain thing, to be attractive to other people, the internalized male gaze, like all of that. We have learned, consciously or not, directly, indirectly, all different ways, right? Macro, meso, micro, on all the levels, we have taken in this information that the purpose of the body is its appearance. And so a lot of us are acting that way because we either have never heard or just forgot about the fact that that's not actually the purpose of our bodies. So the same way that if you thought the purpose of your home was to look a certain way, and then someone came along and said, oh, actually, that's not true. The purpose of your home is for you to enjoy living inside of it. That might change things about how you distribute your resources to the internal and external. The same is true with your body, okay? So if you have the belief that your body is here for you to look a certain way, what I'm doing right now is coming along and saying, that's not actually true. That's not the purpose of your body. That's not the intention of your body. And so do you know what the purpose of your body is? Do you know what the intention of you living in a body is? If it's not to look a certain, because we need to know, if it's not this, then what is it? If I'm not focused on this, what do I focus on? Right? And so what is the purpose of your body? And if it's not to look a certain way, what do you replace it with? Well, thank you for asking. The purpose of your body is to allow you to experience your life. The purpose of your body is to allow you to experience your human life. So what does that mean? Because I used to hear stuff like this and be like, what's the alternative? Right? Like this is just what I am. So think of it this way. Think about like your five senses, okay? if you are, right, you're the soul. We already covered this. You are the soul with a body, not a body with a soul. So if you're the spirit, you're the soul, you are the energy that lives in your body. Well, if you didn't have a body, right, and you were just energy, then you wouldn't experience your five senses. You wouldn't be seeing anything or hearing anything or tasting anything or smelling anything or touching anything because it's your body that does those things, okay? So if you're just a bunch of energy, you might be, conscious awareness, but you're not actually experiencing human life, okay? So the purpose of you having a body and living in a body is that you get to experience your five senses coming to life. Okay? The things that you can smell. If you didn't have a body, you couldn't do that. The things that you can hear. Think about things that you enjoy smelling. Like really nice flowers. That's what comes to me. That's the first. What do you love smelling? Oh, I love, like, my mom has really nice, like, soaps and perfumes. That's the next thing that comes to me. I love the smell of gasoline. I love a new car. Okay, like, what do you like to smell? Okay, so just get an idea, right? Like, really fill in the blanks here of, like, what are some of those things? Just to practice bringing the awareness to what your body is actually here for. Because we need to be able to anchor into that and ground into that and have an actual real connection with that. It's not a waste of time to do this, because what you're doing is you're giving your brain a different paradigm, a different way of thinking. Okay, so those are things we love to smell. What do you love to listen to? What do you love to hear? Your favorite songs, the waves crashing in the ocean, birds when I wake up in the morning, someone's voice that you really love. What do you love to hear and listen to? Okay, if you didn't have a body, you couldn't do these things. You wouldn't be hearing anything. Now think about the things you love to taste, okay? And eat and experience, drink. Because if you didn't have a human body, you couldn't experience these things, okay? And so this is the purpose of your body. And you really need to understand that. This is the purpose of your body, is for you to experience human life. And again, for me, if someone said that to me years ago, I'd be like, that is a super vague thing that doesn't make any sense, because what does experiencing a human life even mean? What you experience through your five senses is what brings your life to life. And without your body, you couldn't have any of that. So the next time you find yourself thinking, believing, behaving as though the purpose of your body is to look a certain way, that's where you get to remember you picked up that message. You can put it back down because it's not actually true, nor has it been serving you very well or getting you what you want. So now you are replacing it with, wait, I'm not here to look a certain way. I'm here in this body to live my life. Now you can again remember to allocate your resources, your time and energy toward what's going on inside more than what's going on outside. And this also is why I always like to bring it back to love, because love is everything and really what we're going for here. Like, again, why are we here? What is the purpose of our life? To me, it is to experience love, give, receive love. Okay. But again, we can't do any of these things. We can't achieve our purpose to feel and experience and love if we don't have a human body through which we get to do it. Okay, so that's what your body's for. Now, having said all of that, I'm going to tell you, now this is going to be another like woo-woo moment for a minute, but what makes this really land for me and what makes me feel like I really get it is if I think this came up at one point in the Harry Potter books, but I don't totally remember. But the idea of thinking about, like, if I were a ghost, okay, just stay with me for a sec. If I were a ghost, okay, and I already died and I was no longer living in a human body, I was in a ghost body, which is essentially energy, then I wouldn't be able to do or have any of these things. And so as a ghost, I think if I remember correctly, there was like a point where a ghost, you can think about this, Harry Potter related or not. If a ghost saw you, for example, eating its favorite food, when it was alive on Earth in human form, this was its favorite food. And then this entity, this person crossed over and died, and now they're a ghost, and they see you eating their favorite food. I imagine in my world that ghost would be jealous. It would be so envious because you get to taste it. You get to eat it. You have taste buds and you get to have this human experience. Okay. So that is what makes it kind of make sense to me, is like, because again, I used to be like, well, what's the alternative? You know, like I was just like born into this body. I don't know what it's like to be here and not experience human life, but that's how I think about it, is like, okay, but if you were alive but not in a human body, which is to basically say if you were a ghost, what would that be like? You couldn't have any of this stuff. And so building on that, where I even get that is okay, so if you've been listening to this podcast for years, or you went back and at any point listened to the episode I did with Caroline Lee Dewey, you'll hear about how she was the first person to basically come along into my life and suggest that she had a message from my dead dad at the time. And you can go back. I do highly recommend you listen to that whole story, especially if you're into the woo-woo stuff. But the reason I wanted to insert this here is because she was someone that explained to me from the view of like a medium-ish, I guess you could call it that, or someone who, you know, has communication with the other side, let's say. She was explaining to me this idea of how sometimes it can feel as though they on the other side are kind of borrowing our bodies here on Earth to have these experiences. And the reason that I'm inserting this here, even though it feels so, again, just like out there and woo-woo, because if I heard myself saying stuff like this years ago, I'd be like, please stop. But the truth is, I have had moments where I don't know how else to explain it. That's exactly what it feels like. Where I will say, like, sometimes I remember this happened, I don't know. The example I think of is like one day where I was like, all I want to do is drink a beer and watch football. Which, if you know anything about me, like, that's not stuff I feel like doing. I find football so boring. I'm sorry, Dad. I do. But I've never really enjoyed it. But like one day I literally was like, I just want to like sit on the couch, crack a beer and watch a football game. And I swear to you, the only way that I knew how to explain it was like, this isn't me. This isn't mine. Nope. Like, and it genuinely feels like my human body is being borrowed so that he can have that experience. He wants to have a beer. And there was one time this happened with like a cheeseburger or something. And it didn't feel like a craving in my body. It felt like someone was taking over my body so that they could have the experience. It's the only way I know how to describe it. But that's why I'm putting it here, because we forget being in human form on this earth, living our life, because I get to whenever I fucking want. I can grab a beer and watch a football game. I could do that any day. I don't think anything of it. But when we don't have that, when at some point I am no longer in a human body, you know, I imagine that if my consciousness still lived on beyond that, it would miss all the things that I get to feel and experience being in a human body. And that, by the way, is even true when it comes to, and I want you to really hold on to this, that is even true when it comes to pain and hurt and discomfort and heartache and fear and all the things that we try to avoid and not feel. We have the opportunity to feel. And I know, like, for me, that it's such a different way of thinking. Because if you're in a relationship toward these emotions, that's like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to have that experience. Sometimes this is going to sound so weird, but sometimes I literally think about, like, I'm just gonna say it. I think about like all the dead people who don't get to do that anymore. I think about all the people. Like really, it makes me emotional. I think about all the people that just don't get to live life anymore. And we're over here living in our human body saying, I don't want that. I only want that part. I don't want that part. Well, you know what? If you, again, like if you were flatlined, if you were totally dead, you would want life. You would want life. You know what? I can't speak for you. I can't speak for you. I can speak for me. I would want life. And that is the relationship I have with all sorts of experiences and emotions now is, God, sometimes it just hurts so fucking bad, but at least I'm feeling something. At least I'm here. Pain is a sign of life. It means that I'm alive. It means I haven't flatlined yet. And that's what I'm here for. And so all of this, I understand a little bit of a tangent, but if you want to understand and connect with yourself as a spiritual being, more than a physical being, you've got to understand what you're even doing here in a physical body. What's the point? What's the purpose? And it definitely is not for you to look a certain way or appear a certain way. And this is where you want to think about, it's not your body as an ornament. It's your body as an instrument. What is your body here to do? And can you connect with that? And if you're not being mindful of this, if you're not examining this, if you're not paying any attention to your relationship with what you think the purpose of your body is, it's going to fill in the blanks and you're going to be likely in a relationship with it where you're objectifying yourself and forgetting about the rest. And so that's why we need to know the purpose is for you to experience your life through your five senses, to embody love and pain and all of it. That is the purpose. And so very much like me sitting in the bathroom of the airplane, I had a moment of forgetting and then I get to remember. And you're going to have moments where you forget. You're going to go back into my body as an ornament and it needs to look a certain way. And then you get to remember, actually, wait, that's not true. My body is an instrument and my body is here for me. Am I experiencing life? Yes. Great. Then my body is serving its purpose. Okay. That's it. Okay, now that you are clear on why you have a human body to begin with and that you are the soul living inside of it, now let's come back to some things we need to clarify about intentional weight loss. Okay, so there's so many things to say. The first is though, I want to clarify something. Maybe you've heard me say this before, but it's very important that, again, as we start moving toward actual, how do I do it? We need to talk about the fact that weight loss is not a behavior. Weight loss is not a behavior. Here's the thing. Weight loss, and again, we're not even really we don't want to talk about weight loss. We want fat loss, if we're telling the truth. Fat loss is not a behavior. Fat loss is a result of behaviors. And yes, there are other things at play. There are other factors. It's not that simple. And in some ways, it is, because if you change your behaviors, you can see a result. That's the part we're focusing on here. So that's why very often people will say, like, the goal is weight loss. Sure, valid, cool, understood. And also, how do we break that down? Because it doesn't really make sense to say the goal is weight loss when you don't have complete control over that. You can focus on your behaviors that will drive the process, but we have to break it down because I feel like I'm going to keep saying this. Nothing just happens. Nothing just happens. Okay? It's not like things are happening to you that you have no control over. It's not that you are powerless. Okay, back to that idea. Nothing just happens. And that's why we need to talk about the fact that weight loss is not a behavior. And weight loss does not just happen or not happen. And the same thing is true for your behaviors. Nothing just happens. You are actively participating, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're a passive bystander. But either way, what is being reflected to you is a reflection of that. So instead of focusing on the result, the outcome, the aftermath, like that's what weight loss is. When you do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, you can get intentional fat loss. Fine. But now it's about saying, instead of focusing on the end goal, now focusing on what are you going to do or not do to help yourself get there. So similar in some ways to saying, I want to run a marathon, and it's like, that's cool and that's great, but it's not something that's just going to happen. Like, you have to put in the work. You have to train for that. You have to have the right equipment for that. You have to wake up early for that. There are things that you have to do in order to get that to happen. And that's an important concept because, again, nothing just happens. And the reason to keep going back to nothing just happens is because there's a lot of, we've talked about learned helplessness and the belief of powerlessness. We believe, especially when it comes to something like intentional weight loss, that it can't be done or that we can't do it. We feel powerless. And what I'm saying to you is nothing just happens. Weight gain doesn't just happen, and weight loss doesn't just happen. These things don't just happen by themselves. They are, again, not entirely, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio that you do this thing and you get this thing. There are other factors. And at the same time, weight gain and weight loss, fat gain and fat loss are in some ways a direct result and outcome of your own choices, decisions, and behaviors. So we have to understand nothing just happens. You are part of the process. You are co-creating. And what this reminds me of is when I was on semester at sea and I had lost 150 pounds and I was so scared. I was so scared of gaining it all back. I was scared of food. I was scared of hunger. I was scared of my body. I was just so scared. And I was journaling about it all the time. And then I remember having this epiphany, really at the time, that I was sitting with so much fear of gaining all this weight and gaining all this weight and gaining all this weight. And then I realized that there is no such thing as like just gaining weight. Like, I'm not going to wake up one day and just have all this weight back on my body. That's not how it works. And I remember realizing that the same way, so something that I used to say all the time, especially when I was losing weight, is I didn't lose 150 pounds. I lost 1 pound 150 times. Like, I realized at a certain point that I was the one making that happen 1 pound at a time. I was the one making it happen. It wasn't happening by itself. I know the work that I had to put in. I know the hours that I had to put in. I know the discipline that I had to put in. I was the one making weight loss happen. It wasn't just happening. And then I realized that the same exact thing was going to be true about weight gain, that there is no such thing as just gaining weight. It's like, what kinds of things would have to change in my choices, in my decisions, in my behaviors that would result in weight gain. And so it was, in some ways it can be really confronting. In some ways it can be really scary and overwhelming. Like, we don't want to have that kind of responsibility, or we don't want to have that kind of power. And at the same time, it was also such a relief. That is, this can't happen to me. This can't happen without me. This can't happen without me. And so either I'm awake and I'm paying attention, or I'm not. But I do have to understand that if I'm working with something as physical as weight gain and weight loss, that's not happening in a vacuum. And I have to pay attention to my role in it, my part in it. So with that as a foundation, now you understand what your body is for, why you're here, and that you have to be actively participating and involved in the process. Now we could talk about framing the whole journey ahead, because I think the most important thing to understand, right? We are holding a baby. We are taking it seriously and we are holding it gently. We are holding a baby. So this is the beginning of kind of looking out into the journey of intentional weight loss and seeing it for what it is. So we've already broken down how this is an opportunity for you to practice and express self-love. This is coming from love. And so I want to break it down a little bit now, integrating fierce and tender self-compassion so you have an idea, again, of what's ahead and how we do it. So because you understand that weight loss is not a behavior and we're focusing on the behavior, let's put it all through the context of tender and fierce self-compassion. Okay, so as a reminder, fierce self-compassion is about taking action to alleviate suffering. Okay, so that's the behavior part of it. You have to actually do things. It's not going to happen by itself. You have to do things. So you have to be fiercely compassionate. Okay, you have to be doing the things. You have to take action. You have to make change. That's the fierceness part. Okay, so you're taking action. Now, the other part of it is tender self-compassion. This is review. What we need is tenderness. Tender self-compassion is about accepting ourselves to alleviate suffering. Okay. So now both of them, right? Fierceness and tenderness are about alleviating your suffering. Fierceness is taking action. The tenderness is accepting your feelings along the way. And if we remember, compassion is really being with your own suffering. So here's what it really boils down to. If what you want is intentional weight loss, you have to engage in the behaviors consciously and intentionally. Now, engaging in the behaviors and making change is fierce self-compassion. And when you do that, when you make changes, you are almost necessarily, inevitably at certain points, going to have emotions and feelings that come up along the way. And tender self-compassion is being willing to be with your own suffering. So fierce self-compassion is essentially sometimes you have to make yourself tolerate suffering when it comes to changing a behavior. So doing something you don't want to do or not doing something that you do want to do. Okay, there's fierce self-compassion is the behavior change, taking action part of it. And then when you change a behavior or you take some sort of action, tender self-compassion says now sit with it. Be with the emotions that come up. Be with your own suffering. So essentially the way that this lands for me is I have to force myself to suffer for the sake of my own well-being. And then I have to be with my own suffering. Fierceness, tenderness. And this always reminds me, it brings me back to something I've said before also, that is, do the thing the person you want to be would do. Do the thing the person you want to be would do. Now, the reason I always say it like that is because very often the thing that will serve and support us the most is not the thing that we feel like doing. And so we don't want to consult the version of us that exists right now. Do I want to do this? Should I do this? Is this what I'm in the mood for? No, we don't want to do any of that. What we want to do is say, who's the person I want to be? And what would she do? And then that's how I work backwards. But so if I do the thing that the person I want to be would do, that almost necessarily means that I'm doing something that I right now don't feel like doing. So I'm being fiercely compassionate because I'm forcing myself to do something that my higher self would do. I'm forcing myself to do it because I don't feel like doing it. Fierce. And then I can sit with myself and say, I know how bad you don't want to do this right now. It is so valid that you are having a temper tantrum about this. I know you would be so much more comfortable if we didn't do it this way. I know. And that is the tenderness. And so I want to give this all to you because this is ultimately, I know I'm calling everything the foundation, but this is what it looks like as you're integrating it, is you have to do the thing. You have to take the action that's fierce, and then you have to pair it with the tenderness. And if you are all fierce or all tender, you are not going to go where you want to go. So I'm going to say another couple things about the fierce self-compassion part of this. And then I think we're going to need another couple episodes about it because this really is the foundation of the whole thing because it requires that you take action. And when it comes to intentional weight loss, to me, the whole thing is about taking action to alleviate suffering, which is compassion. So we need to update the belief system around that a lot as well, too. So when I'm thinking about this for myself, I think that this is way more true for my first intentional weight loss, which was losing 150 pounds, than it is for my most recent weight loss, which you've heard me say is more like recreational, like just kind of for fun. But regardless of the differences in both of those scenarios, what I'm about to say is true for both of them. So ultimately what I'm saying is whether it's about losing 150 pounds or it's about losing 15 pounds, it doesn't really matter. For me, the point is I made a commitment to myself and then I showed up to achieve it. I made a commitment to myself and I showed up to honor it. I didn't let discomfort stop me. I didn't let uncertainty stop me. I didn't let bullshit excuses get in the way. I set a goal and I worked toward it. I did what I had to do to realize the thing that I wanted to achieve. And that is very loving. And so I will just, as I've done before, read to you exactly what I wrote down here in my notes. That is, this is self-love. The problem is when y'all think self-care is all tenderness all the time, because that is what's fucking you up. So we need to talk about this, okay? Is if I make a goal, if I set a goal for myself and I start working toward it, and along the way I get uncomfortable and I have to practice discipline and I need willpower. These are things that to me are very loving. I'm not letting myself give up on myself. I'm not letting discomfort stop me from where I want to go. I'm not letting myself be stopped because where I want to go matters to me. And so it's very loving for me to say, I know I'm uncomfortable, but I'm going where I want to go. That's the point. That's part of it. So like I keep saying, there's at least an episode's worth of this topic of what I'm going to call reclaiming fierce self-compassion for what it is around food and eating and our weight. But I'm going to come back and say more about that because I want to wrap this up today with the idea that is, as I keep saying, it's about the integration of the fierceness and the tenderness. And I think we need both of them working together. We need fierceness and tenderness kind of back and forth. I see it as like a braid, like they are threaded like this together. We need both of those for something like intentional weight loss to be safe and sustainable. So I want to give you an example of how I see them kind of like working together. So you can practice integrating. You can practice practicing. So as a reminder, if we raise the level of consciousness, which we've already done, and now we're looking at this not as about food and eating and our body and our weight, but really as an example or an opportunity to express love and compassion to ourselves, through ourselves, for ourselves. Now we have, again, the guiding principles. So I always think about now, again, through the lens of inner parent, inner child. If our intention is to use the process of intentional weight loss as the mechanism through which we learn how to reparent ourselves and take care of ourselves, which is to say, we are using intentional weight loss as the mechanism through which we learn how to love ourselves. Here's an example, okay? I think about when you're a parent and you have to take a kid to the doctor, okay? Most of the time, kids don't want to go to the doctor, to like get their shots and stuff. So this is where you can think about the fierce self-compassion. The fierce compassion is, I have to take you to the doctor because I'm your parent. Like this is the taking action part. We are going to the doctor, okay? And that's the fierceness, that's the parent. You got to do the thing. Now, if you say to your child that you're going to the doctor, that you have to take the child to the doctor, then your child, in this example, has a big reaction to that. I don't want to go to the doctor. I hate the doctor. I hate shots. I don't want to see the needles. I hate blood. I don't want to go. And so you, as the parent, have a choice. You have options. How do you want to parent around this? How do you want to parent around this? Okay. So here's what you're not going to do, because this is not about taking a child to the doctor. This is about you understanding how to do this in your own self with yourself. Okay. In this example, here's what you're not going to do as the parent. You're not going to say, oh, you don't want to go? Well, then forget it. We're not going to go. That would be like too much tenderness, right? Your feelings are valid. Let's be in your feelings, and let's make your feelings the deciding factor about whether we're going to go or not. That's what you're not doing as a parent, right? You're not saying, oh, you don't like the rule? Well, then fuck it. Forget about the rule. We don't need rules. That's not parenting. That's handing all your power over to your child. Okay. So that's what you're not doing. But the other thing that you don't want to do as the parent with yourself or with your actual children is do that thing that is, we have to get in the car. We have to go to the doctor. You don't have a choice. Your feelings don't matter. Everyone hates the doctor and does it anyway. Just deal with it. Get on, move on, get over it, and get in the car and shut up. Okay. So you don't want to do that either. Because why? Why don't you want to do that? Think about it for a sec. Because what we're going for here is safety, right? You can't be the parent that says, shut up, get over it, and get on in the car. We're going to the doctor, and have your child feel safe with you. They might feel safe in the sense that you're taking them to the doctor, fine, but they don't feel safe with you anymore as the parent. Okay? So those are the things you're not doing. But then the question becomes, how do you do it in a way where you still get the kid to the doctor, but you don't make them feel unsafe in the process? And this is the question. This is what it all comes down to. So here's the answer. You practice tender compassion and fierce compassion together. So what does that look like? What it looks like is, here's the fierceness. We're going to the doctor. I am the parent, and I am in charge, and you and your health and your life and your well-being and safety are my responsibility. We're going to the doctor. I have to take you to the doctor. And then that's your fierceness, okay? So you're setting boundaries. You're making the rules. You are embodying agency. You're being the parent. We have to do this thing now, okay? And then when your inner child has a temper tantrum, now you practice tenderness. That is, I know how bad you don't want to go to the doctor. I know that needles are really scary, and I know that you hate blood, and I know that this is really hard, and it's okay that it's really hard. And I'm not mad at you because you don't want to go to the doctor. It's valid that you don't want to go to the doctor. When I was your age, I never wanted to go to the doctor either. So you're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to be angry. All of these emotions are okay. And we're still going to the doctor. And I know that you don't like it. And I know you're scared. And it's okay because I'm here with you. I'm here with you in your fear. You are not alone. And we're going to go to the doctor and we're going to be okay. And then when we're done with the doctor, we can go to the playground that you love so much at the park. Okay? So that's how you parent. That's how you parent. But this is what it looks like with your actual children and also with yourself. Because it is not loving. Think about it. On either side of the pendulum, either extreme is not loving. For you to say, shut up, get in the car, we're going to the doctor, that's too fierce. That's too harsh. That's not loving, and that doesn't feel safe. But also, if all you ever do is say, oh, you don't feel like it? Well, then forget it. Then your child never goes to the doctor. That's neglectful. That's not parenting. It's not sound parenting anyway. And it definitely isn't going to get you to health and healing, right? We have to be in this gray area. But the truth is, it's not even gray area. It's just integrated. It's being fierce and being tender at the same time. So this is again, for me, this is like the framework. You want to talk about intentional weight loss from a safe, sustainable approach? You want to talk about doing it in a way where you feel physically, emotionally, spiritually safe with yourself. This is what it looks like. And so you can probably tell in an example like this that what usually happens with something like diet culture, right? Again, and I'll speak for myself. This is my own personal experience of this, that diet culture is very shut up and get in the car, right? It's really fierce. It's really harsh. It feels mean, right? But the thing is, we fall under like this illusion that it works because we get the weight off. For example, the same way that you could be like, well, I got my kid in the car and I got my kid to the doctor. It worked. And it's like, okay, well, you're forgetting about the fact that your child needs to feel safe with you. So did it work? Did it really work? Right? And so that's like diet culture. But then to me, anti-diet culture has swung it all the way to the other side where it's like, just don't go to the doctor. And it's like, but that's also not loving. That's not me taking care of myself. That's not me taking care of my child. That's neglect. So love is tender and fierce compassion working together so that you can tolerate the discomfort of the thing you don't want to do for the sake of your own well-being. And like I said, I'm going to say a lot more about fierce self-compassion and how we actually really do this in a way that feels safe. But I want to leave you today with this idea, because what I hear, and I'm going to say a lot more too about, I used to listen to motivational speeches all the time, and I still do. But there was one, I think it was Will Smith. It was a clip of Will Smith talking about how he kind of talks to himself. And this is what I want to leave you with today. This idea of, I love you too much to ... Because as we're going to continue to talk about, our perception sometimes is that if we are forcing ourselves to do something we don't want to do, or we're forcing ourselves to be uncomfortable, that it's because, we hate ourselves, we don't like ourselves, we don't feel worthy, we're insecure, all of that. And I want to plant the seed that we are going to come back and water for the next few weeks, that I want to give you a different way of thinking about it. That sometimes the reason that you are tolerating discomfort, sometimes the reason that you're forcing yourself to do something that you don't want to do is because you love yourself too much. I love you too much to let you X, Y, and Z. And that's the story. That's the new narrative, right? It's not, I hate you so much you have to. It's, I love you too much to let you X, Y, and Z. And so I think about this Will Smith clip because he was saying, right, like there are going to be times where you don't want to study for the exam. You want to go out with your friends, right? But how do you practice fierce self-compassion to force yourself to stay home at night and do the studying you don't want to do? Because sometimes what helps with that is, I love you too much to let you go hang out with your friends when you have this exam tomorrow. I love you too much. I can't let you do that, right? This isn't aligned with where we want to go. And he also uses the example of, I think it was like pizza or something, but he was just saying like, I love you too much to let you eat that way. I want to take better care of you. I care too much about you to let you feed yourself that way. And it's this that I want to pay attention to over the next couple episodes, where it's like, if we are doing this in other areas, it makes sense. It makes sense that we have to do things we don't want to do, and we have to tolerate discomfort, and we have to go out of our comfort zone, and we have to, it makes sense. And we're all on board for that. But as soon as we try bringing it into our relationship with food and eating, and dare I talk about intentional weight loss, now all of a sudden it's diet culture. And again, it's like, no, it's not. It's definitely not. But we need to explicitly call this out for what it is. That is, sometimes you have to be able and willing to say, I love you too much to let you keep doing what you're doing. And this is why we need to talk more about fear, self-compassion in action, not just like as an idea, but like, what does it look like? Because you will have to make yourself uncomfortable, and you will need to embody the tenderness to make it safe and sustainable. So that's what you get to practice right here, right now. It doesn't have to be about weight loss or about fat loss or about anything that I'm talking about. But if there are things that you like want to do, or there are things that you want to stop doing, can you even just consider, again, you can contemplate, you can marinate with this. You don't have to do anything, but can you consider coming from the perspective of, I love you so much. I love you too much to let you keep doing this thing. And just try it on and let that linger in there, right? Because it's very much the same as saying, I love you too much to let you go without a doctor appointment. I care about you too much. We have to do something different, or we have to go do the thing, whatever it is. So that is what I'm going to leave it at today, because again, this is framing the entire journey, because when you're clear that what you're doing is operating from love and compassion, now it's time to talk about really what that looks like, how to do that and what that looks like internally and externally. All right, so that is what I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. As always, please, if you haven't, rate, review, subscribe, and share the pod. Come join me on Patreon, and I will see you next week. I hope you have the best day ever, and I love you so much. Mwah.